It's Celtic first and Celtic last and Celtic over all.
With manager Hay preferring a strike force of ex-Motherwell man Brian McClare and Maurice Johnston, a club record buy from Watford. Off the pitch, the quiet McClare and the brash Johnston were worlds apart, but on the field they formed a formidable partnership. Another increasingly key performer was the majestic Paul McStay. A product of a Celtic youth system, the midfielder made his debut in January 1982 as a precocious teenager. But despite his tender years, the player possessed a talent so significant he was simply too good to hold back. An elegant ball player with a wonderful creative vision, McStay was a football architect. Capable of threading a ball through the eye of a needle, he was a man who could change the course of a game in a heartbeat. Yet despite such talent, season 1985-86 looked set to be a bitter disappointment. Out of both cup competitions in the early rounds and struggling for consistency in the league, the campaign threatened to end empty-handed for Celtic. Then, a remarkable late revival saw the Celts pick up a maximum 14 points from 7 games. As the season entered its final day, the Hoops still retained a slim chance of denying surprise package Hearts their first title since 1960. Davy Hayes' team travelled to St Mirren, knowing only a Hearts defeat at Dundee and a Celtic victory by at least 3 goals would take the title to Parkhead. It was an unlikely scenario. On a rain-sodden pitch, the visitors, wearing their mint green away kit, soon settled. Their play took on a distinct sense of purpose. The drab and damp Paisley afternoon was suddenly lit up with a display of attacking football the Buddies had no answer for. A bullet header from McClare and a strike from Johnston put the visitors firmly in command by the half-hour mark. Celtic's third goal was a thing of beauty. Starting from the edge of their own area, the boys swept the length of the Love Street pitch with a wonderfully flowing and swift passing move. McGrain, McLeod, McStay, Aitken and McClare all combined with devastating efficiency before the ball was dispatched into the St Mirren net from close range by the onrushing Johnston. The McStay drive then made it 4 before half-time. Just 10 minutes into the second half, McClare's second of the match made it 5-0. As the long league campaign entered its final minutes, the game in Paisley was petering to a close. St Mirren keeper Jim Stewart gathered the ball in his area as Celtic pressed forward once more. As Stewart nonchalantly prepared to launch the ball downfield, he was startled by a sudden and joyous roar from the terracing. Scenes of delirium swept around him as countless radios relayed the remarkable news. Dundee had scored. Albert Kidd, Dundee's substitute and Celtic supporter, had come off a bench to deliver a fatal blow to the jammed Tarts. Fears of an equaliser for the Edinburgh side were quickly extinguished as Kidd netted a second to spot further wild celebrations. It was party time in Paisley. In that spring of 1986, Rangers appointed Scotland international Graham Souness as player-manager. The club had been mere also-rans in recent years, but the Owen and Melba family were now ready to approve an unprecedented spending spree. It was perhaps the beginning of a reckless policy which would lead ultimately to the death of the Ibrox club, but initially, on-the-pitch success was near instant. Rangers claimed the League Cup after a controversial 2-1 final victory over Celtic, the Hoops having striker Johnston sent off. To absolve into the wins, Souness's men would go on to claim the league championship. That trophyless season would spell the end for Davy Hay, as the Celtic board reacted to a rejuvenated Rangers by returning to Parkhead the iconic figure of Billy McNeill. McNeill had the task of rebuilding a squad stripped bare by an array of departures. The prolific Brian McClare would depart to Manchester United, Mo Johnson to Nantes, Murdo McLeod to Borussia Dortmund, and Alan McInally to Aston Villa. If that wasn't pressure enough, this would be Celtic's centenary season. Before a ball had been kicked, Many had hastily dismissed the boys' hopes of silverware.
It's Celtic first and Celtic last and Celtic over all.
So we may all be thinking Davy Hayes probably for the chop here, but he wasn't thinking that, or at least he wasn't. Well, I was going to say that wasn't what he was saying in public. I know for a fact he didn't know. He didn't really think that he was going to lose his job. Now, whether he'd been told by the board that things were okay, I don't know. But actually, behind the scenes, the board had already decided that that with the Centenary season, the 87-88 season, marking 100 years of this great club, they needed someone special to take them through that season. Perhaps, especially in the face of what Rangers were doing. Perhaps that much they saw. And it may have been a short-term move, focusing just on the Centenary season. But they decided to reappoint Billy McNeill.
Which was an amazing turnaround, considering he had left kind of in the huffs a little bit.
Indeed. Now, what McNeill told me about this was that he wouldn't have gone back had Desmond White still been around. Desmond White had died, but Tom Devlin had taken over, and then he died. And then Jack McGinn, by this point, was chairman. Had Desmond White still been alive, Billy McNeill says himself he would not have gone back to Celtic Park. He couldn't have gone back to Celtic Park in all good conscience, because he'd left really because Desmond White was leading a board that had showed no ambition and had clearly made it known openly to the press in a written statement to the press that Billy McNeill was not behaving as a Celtic manager should. So McNeill decided to go back. He'd been offered a job at Airdrie, Chris, as you probably know. He'd been offered a job in one of the Emirates out in the Middle East, because he needed, after a failed business venture, after Manchester City and Aston Villa, to a greater or lesser extent, not going well as jobs, he needed to be in the game. He needed to have a job. He needed to make money like the rest of us. So my memory of this is that McNeill had turned up for a Lisbon Lions dinner in about the April, May of 87. McGinn was at that dinner, had seen the reaction of the Celtic support as McNeill entered the room, and made the decision at that point that this was the man, the only man that could be the Celtic manager in the Centenary season, the only man who could take over from Davy Hay. So they met in a car park in Hamilton. McGinn has said to me that there was nothing overtly strange about that. They just felt that had he met Billy McNeill anywhere in public, not just at Celtic Park, but any hotel in Glasgow or whatever, the story would have been out like that. And the reason he couldn't be in public was because he hadn't told Davy Hay. Until he'd spoken to Billy McNeill, Celtic could not be seen to be sacking Davy Hay. So Davy Hay was summoned from his home in Paisley, was brought to Celtic Park, and Jack McGinn said, "I'm sorry, Davy, but it's over. You're out." He didn't say who was replacing him. Davy Hay learned of that on the way home on the radio. And it's my understanding that Davy Hay and his family, for months after, felt bitter, deeply bitter and hurt about the way they'd been treated by Celtic. And as a great Celtic man in his own right, I think he probably had every reason to feel that. But that's football, and Billy McNeill was back in the job that he says had felt like had always been his, and had kind of been taken away from him by the actions of the board back in the early 80s and 83. He was back in harness for the Centenary season.
And the Centenary season itself was a real rebuilding project. See, when you look at the players that left and the players that came in, I remember, the likes of the Brian McClures leaving and Mo Johnson leaving and even, Alan McAnally leaving and, guys like that, Davy Provan retiring. But when they brought in players like Chris Morris and Frank McAvaney later on the season, Joe Miller later on the season, Andy Walker, Billy Stark, these were all names that I recognised and I knew, and I was saying to myself, at the time, going, you know what, that's not too bad. I mean, some of these signs are quite good.
Yeah. Well, to be honest with you, I knew Billy Stark and I knew Mick McCarthy. I we knew Andy Walker. I wasn't entirely familiar with him, but I didn't know anything about Chris Morris. Now, between ourselves and everybody else who might be listening, I know for a fact that Andy Walker, as he's told me so himself, was actually signed by Davy Hay. Davy, you might be getting an exclusive here, I don't know.
Okay.
Andy Walker had been informed that Celtic were interested in him before Davy Hay was back in the job, before Billy McNeill was back in the job. And Tommy McLean was the Motherwell manager. Andy Walker was top goal scorer at Motherwell. Tommy McLean, Jim McLean's brother. And sure enough, the boss asked to see Andy Walker, and Walker goes and says, "Yeah, boss, what's up?" He says, "There's a team interested in you." And Andy Walker says, "Well, who is it?" Expecting him to say, "Well, Celtic." And he says, "No, Dundee United."
Huh.
At this point, Walker, who is it? The bright guy, thinks, "Okay, you're trying to punt me off to your brother's team, but I know Celtic are interested." So he says to him, "No thanks, boss." After giving me thinks about it for a couple of days, he thinks, "No thanks, boss." Only then, eventually, does McLean say, "Actually, Celtic are interested in you as well. Would you be interested? Would you be interested?" So Walker goes off. The other thing is, we shouldn't forget, Davy Hay also signed Mick McCarthy. Mick McCarthy was in the dressing room. Again, told me so himself. Was in the dressing room at Celtic Park at the end of the 86-87 season. And he said people like Mo Johnson were still there. He says he distinctly remembers having a chat with Brian McClare in the dressing room at Celtic. But you're right, all these guys were on the way out. Murdo McLeod had gone to Borussia Dortmund. Alan McAnally went. Davy Provan retired through illness. I remember at Hearts, at the end of that 86-87 season, on the very last day, 3,000 Celtic fans stayed behind after a 1-0 defeat. John Robertson scored for Hearts. A 1-0 defeat. We all stayed behind, and we cheered these guys back onto the pitch. They were pretty ginger about coming back on. We cheered them back on the pitch and gave them the most incredible reception. Mm-hmm. And I think only Celtic fans would do that.
Our guest this week, of course, needs no introduction. Frank McAvaney, the famous or infamous Frank McAvaney.
I'm all right, lads. I'm all right. How are you guys?
Absolutely superb. So after 85 appearances and 33 goals, you got your boyhood dream of signing for Celtic.
When I came to Celtic, you've got to remember, there was old biscuits in board, and they were haggling over different stupid things, and me and Big Billy, the McNeill, I just wanted to sign, you know. I thought, you know, deal with everything later. And my agent was saying, "No, you've got to deal with this now and all that." And I just wanted to sign, and I signed. And it, you know, to be honest, like they wanted me to play on the Monday, to play on the Saturday. And this was on the Friday, and I should have waited because I would have got it all tied up. Because when I went to Celtic, I thought I would never leave. And of course, you know, the promises that they made for me to play on the Friday, for me to play on the Saturday, there was a lot of promises made. And of course that all got retracted with them. And if I'd have waited till Monday and you know and looked through the contract and got it all in writing, then there wouldn't have been any problem.
How did your family feel about that, Frank? I know they're all sort of lifelong Celtic supporters.
Yeah. Signing, well, to be honest, one of the proudest moments of my life was, you know, not signing for Celtic, and that was great, but when I looked up, because my dad took me home and away to Celtic game, my dad and my uncle, and on that Saturday against Hibs, when I looked up to the director's box and seen them moving and giving my dad and my uncle a seat in the director's box, you know, I was very happy. I was going to run out of tunnel. Little Jimmy appeared, Jinky, and he just shook my hand and gave us a currency. He says, "Just go and enjoy yourself." Wee man, he called me. Just go and enjoy yourself, wee man. The crowd will love you, and it was you know, things like that you don't get that at any other club.
Most of those players had, a good crop of them had gone on the next season, as you rightly say. Chris Morris had come in from Sheffield Wednesday, where Billy McNeill had spotted him during his time in England as a real flying machine, a really fit player. And the interesting story about Morris is McNeill, a genuine McNeill signing, McNeill phoned Chris Morris at home, still living with his mother in Cornwall. Well, that was his address and phone number, right? Phoned him up and he gets his mother, and really subtle, says, do I detect a hint of an Irish accent there? It's Mrs. Morris. And right enough, she came from County Mayo and still had a bit of an accent, yeah? And she said, oh yes, that's absolutely right. So he charmed her, completely charmed her. Chris Morris was away on a stag do or something. And anyway, the long and the short of it is, Chris Morris gets a flight or a train. He gets a train from Cornwall to London. He flies from London to Glasgow and he gets a taxi to Glasgow Airport to Celtic Park. He gets to Celtic Park and there's no one waiting there for him to sign. He can't find it. He knocks on the front door. There's no one there. He has to climb over the wall of the Janefield to get in. This is in the book, actually, isn't it? He has to climb over the book of the Janefield to get in. He eventually finds Billy McNeill. They get on well. He agrees to sign. You know, I think there's a tribunal involved. He agrees to sign. And he said, and Billy says, well, how much were your expenses coming up? And he says, 120 quid, 150 quid or something. Billy genuinely goes and gets the biscuit tin. You know, after looking a bit white at how much it's costing, you know, this kind of for this guy to come up and sign, and gives him the money and sends him off and says, I'll see you for pre-season training. Now that is the way that it was done then. Yeah.
No private jets for us, eh?
We're
a working class club.
It's a world away. You think about Andy Walker again for a second. Andy Walker told me a story about he used to go to Ibrox and love it because you could sort of it was plush, elegant. Everybody had their own bath, you know, and you could have a shower if you wanted to. And he says, certainly part of the showers were antiquated, and they used carbolic soap. Walker said to me, carbolic soap
with Darth Vader on them.
Yeah, for F's sake, you know, carbolic soap. You know, and so these guys get signed. Then we start for you'll have about 75,000, and very quickly gel together in this lovely new strip with a grandad collar and a pin, a little sort of button, and a new crest. But as a little note here that we should add, Celtic have been thinking about their centenary season. The foresight bit is unusual, but they've been thinking about their centenary season for some time. From about 85, 86, Jack McGinn had been thinking that how do we mark this in a special way? And it was he who came up with the idea of a different shirt, a different badge, the theatre production, the World Cup theatre production, which was a massive success, ran for 6 weeks. The exhibition at the People's Palace, which 250,000 people came to that exhibition of Celtic memorabilia at the People's Palace. And that's to his credit, you know, frankly, because that's not the kind of thing that can be done at the last minute. And one or two people have said to me about the book, why did you speak to Jack McGinn? Why did you include his book? You know, and I think, well, he was chairman of Celtic at the time, so you have to get a fair representation of what the board were thinking, you know, and that's at least the kind of thing they were thinking. But anyway, we got off to a good start.
And everybody had that shirt. I'm daydreaming here. I'm thinking, we all had that shirt. Even my pals that weren't even Celtic supporters, everybody has the iconic Centenary Year shirt.
And had a kind of diamondy sort of print through it. I've still got it upstairs in the drawer, you know, and goodness knows how many people who lost that shirt or, you know, should have bought it at the time or whatever have said to me over the years, can I have it? I'll buy it if you forget it. Yeah. You know, I can still just about fit into it, but not easily.
We seek him here, we seek him there, never to find is very rare. You can go to any single country in the world and you'll find dedicated followers of Celtic. Yes,
it was actually my mum that used to take me and my brothers to Celtic Park when we were young, a wee bit unusual from the usual, you know, I suppose. Usually it's your dad that takes you, but yeah, my wee ma used to take me and my brothers, and we used to stand at just under the big floodlight at the Celtic end, right next to the main stand. Great days, and thanks to my ma for introducing me to Celtic.
cannot tell, you'll find him. You never hide his colours, cause these colours, they don't run.
Well, Celtic, it's not just one thing. Celtic's my life. It's most of the boys that are here, you know, it's an all-encompassing thing, you know what I mean? And I mean, my life really is planned from Celtic game to Celtic game. Mm-hmm. It's, you know, where are we going this week? Are we at home? What are we doing? You know, we'll usually be planning for weeks in advance for whatever it might be.
Glasgow town is where he's bound to watch the famous hoops, cause he's a dedicated follower of Celtic.
Okay, we're here with Paul and Tim today outside Celtic Park. We're going to talk about Celtic. So Paul, favourite ever Celtic player?
Isn't it Larson? Cracking player. Came at a cheap price and done the business. World class player. His best goal was a goal against the Huns, the chip. That was sensational. That's a commentary you always hear. You see that goal, that's a commentary you always hear. That's a commentary. I enjoyed the under Strachan with Tynecastle. We were getting beat 2-0 at half time. Petrov got injured. Pearson came on and changed the game. The man scored in the last minute. It was just a highlight that day. Magic.
Oh yes he is. Oh yes he is. Oh yes he is. Oh yes he is. County Clare.
Probably 1986 at Love Street. Albert Kidd Day. I was there in the pouring rain. Brilliant.
You never hide his colours, cause these colours they don't run, cause he's a dedicated follower of Celtic.
Paul Lambert. Thought he was fantastic, read the game brilliant. Defensively, good ball retention, fantastic player.
You can go to any single country in the world and you'll find dedicated followers of Celtic. Yes, you'll find dedicated followers of Celtic. Yeah, you'll find dedicated followers.
But yeah, I remember them getting off to a good start against Motherwell. They beat 4-0, and they beat Greenock by a similar, Morton rather, by a similar score on the first day of the season. And that seems a good omen because Bill O'Neill's first 10 years as Celtic manager had also started at Capello with a win. So they got, people like Stark. And McGee was getting a run in the team, injury-free. Mark McGee had been signed from Hamburg 2 or 3 seasons ever, but had been a bit sort of hamstrung, probably literally. And Andy Walker started scoring straight off. But they seemed a bit lightweight. But for the moment, they were doing pretty well. But there was a pivotal Old Firm game that came, you probably remember this, that came up very quickly in the season. The Celtic absolutely dominated. So the first Old Firm game of that centenary season, Souness is still player manager of Rangers, still wants to strut about. And really, for the first half hour of that game, I remember an English teacher of mine, a Liverpool supporter, Liverpool season ticket holder, used to go down and watch them every couple of weeks. He said that first half hour that Celtic played in that game is the finest Old Firm performance by either team in the last 15 to 20 years. They were that good. Anyway, in the first few minutes, McGee gets away down the jungle side. Celtic are playing towards London Road End. And he centres a ball across. Again, Archie, I don't know why I sort of remember these things, but Archie McPherson says, there was something lurking in the back of the Rangers' goal. It was the ball. And Billy Stark, I don't know what else he expected it to be, but Billy Stark had hit this, just appeared on the edge of the box in that kind of languid way of his, and sort of hit the ball low, curling under and across the outstretched arm of Chris Woods. And it finished 1-0. And the game petered out a little bit. It was notable for other things. A young guy called Alan McKnight, Belfast, played in goal for Celtic. And he would feature a lot in that centenary season. And then really not again for Celtic. Because Pat Boehner kept getting an arthritic type of illness. And also Graeme Souness was sent off for a terrible tackle on Billy Stark. Now Stark, basically Graeme Souness is frustrated at this point. He isn't the boss in the midfield, and he comes in and gets Stark, who's lost a boot in a previous challenge, and is picking it up and takes him from behind up into the air. Stark, being an old pro, had a look over his shoulder and told me when I spoke to him at Hampden about this, because he's bossing the under-21s, I was. and he said to me, I knew it was coming. So I was ready for it. Had I not been, he could have broken my leg. And Souness was instantly dismissed.
I remember howling at the time watching that penalty.
Yeah,
howling.
I was in the jungle. Yeah.
But those Celtic versus Rangers matches that year, Douglas, were just etched in your memory. You know, you get Souness sent off, you get the punch up between Woods and McAvaney, and it was just out of this world, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. That was the second game. Was quite right. Then that punch up, that absolutely remarkable 2-2 draw. And how Rangers ever got a draw out of that, I do not know.
I was sick that day.
You know, it was. I mean, McNeil was furious afterwards. Furious with his players. And Rangers should never have been allowed. The Rangers had 9 men, we ended up with, 10. But McAvaney got sent off, Woods got sent off, Butcher got sent off later on for elbowing Alan McKnight, who also played in that game. McKnight said that really there was just a little bit of blood on his lip, and he used his glove to smear it around his face to make it look like, and then told the ref. So there was lots of claret on him, you know, and Butcher got sent off. But of course, Roberts conducted the crowd, staying the sash and that kind of thing at the end. And the long and the short of that is they all ended up in court. You know, not bringing the game to dispute. It was a sort of charge of breach of the peace and what have you. And it was remarkable. It never happened in Scotland before. These guys, professional footballers, in court for something that happened on the pitch.
I don't think anybody really could believe that they ended up in court, though. You know, because this is what Celtic versus Rangers was about. That's what we knew at the time. And to look back on it today, you think, oh yeah, they should have ended up in court. I remember at the time going, like, even the Rangers players, what the hell are they doing in court? I mean, this was the fun and the excitement, and this was the, call it what you want. This was your 90-minute bigotry that everybody was wrapped up in.
That's it.
They ended up in court.
Yeah, it's a crazy way to think about it, and we can come to the court thing in just 1 second. But just to give it the context, we're not all that long away from the 1980 Cup final, and I was at Ibrox that day in October '87, and it did feel like there could be a riot.
Yeah,
it wasn't incendiary. Sorry,
wasn't it exciting though?
It was absolutely. But it was hugely incendiary. There was an incredible atmosphere, and I think it goes back. The police feared there was going to be a riot that day and pushed for charges against these guys. I think that was the reason for it, because they had been found out back in 1980 for the way that they had got their tactics wrong, and that every policeman that should have been in Hampden outside the ground waiting for the fans to come out. You know, and basically had caused the riot themselves that day, and wanted now in '87 to be seen to be doing the right thing.
Tommy Burns, playing for a people and a cause. On a sunny Saturday in Glasgow in May 1988, Celtic's fans at Hampden were in sparkling form. Frank McAvaney's 2 goals at the end of the Scottish Cup final had secured an historic double of league and cup trophies in the club's Centenary Year. In front of tens of thousands of rapturous fans, one Celtic player slumped to his knees. With his bright red hair, he was hard to miss, and as he regained his composure, a TV reporter grabbed him by the shoulder and asked him what was so special about the fans he'd knelt in front of. Tommy Burns wheeled towards the Celtic support, and pointing at Hampden's packed slopes, he replied, "That's what's so special about them. They are there, and they are always there, and God bless every last one of them." In his 17-year career as a player at Celtic, Glasgow boy Burns was a firm fan's favourite. Allied with his stint as a manager and later head of youth development, he became a club immortal. Signing S-forms for Celtic as a 14-year-old, Tommy would make his first team debut, aged 19, in 1975, after being farmed out to several lower league clubs, which included a stint, incredibly, in Zimbabwe. Within 2 years, he was an ever-present in the first team and lifted the league championship in 1977, taking the first of 5 league medals in the hoops. Cup finals would also be a constant for Tommy, and he would pocket 5 Scottish Cup medals during his career, as well as a runners-up medal in the loss against Aberdeen in 1984. Notable among these games was the Hampden riot match of 1980, the 100th Scottish Cup final win over Dundee United in 1985, and the pinnacle final in 1988 that meant so much to him. On May 20th, 1989, as he descended the steps at Hampden to celebrate his club's 29th Cup win, there's no way Burns could have imagined that the 30th trophy in this competition would elude the club for 6 long years, by which time he himself had ascended to the managerial seat at Celtic Park. As Celtic withered on the football vine in the early 1990s, Tommy had travelled south down the M77 to Kilmarnock, where he ended the club's wilderness years by bringing them back into Scotland's top flight in 1992 as player-manager. As Fergus McCann finally wrestled control of Celtic away from the mafioso families who'd almost destroyed the club, his thoughts turned to Tommy as the man he wanted to take Celtic back to the big time. Celtic's call was too loud to ignore, and the rapture of the Celtic fans was short-lived when Burns moved to paradise as the shadow of corrupt football authorities broadened over Celtic Park. The Kings Park suits at the Scottish FA had decided they didn't like the way Celtic recruited their new manager and fined the club £100,000, the maximum possible amount. In these pre-Bosman days, Kilmarnock were also allowed to retain Tommy's player registration, effectively sending him into the forced retirement. As Celtic Park began its rebuild, the club were forced to rent Hampden Park from the same suits they had recently been in conflict with. A miserable 1994-95 season was only rescued with the capture of the Scottish Cup in 1995, bringing an end to a 6-year trophy drought stretching back to 1989. The following year brought renewed hope, with new players like Pierre Van Hooijdonk, Phil O'Donnell and Andy Tom making a real impact on the Scottish scene as Celtic found themselves back home at Paradise. Despite only losing 1 league game the entire season, Celtic fell short to Rangers in a 2-1 defeat in the Scottish Cup semi-final, and also came runner-up in the league as the Blues waltzed ominously towards Celtic record of 9 titles in a row. Again, they were helped by the suits of the Scottish FA, as Jim Farry and his team deliberately delayed the signing of prolific Portuguese striker George Cadetti, whose registration was illegally held up to allow Rangers a further advantage against the resurgent Celtic. Later, this disgusting action would cost Farry his job, as a tribunal laid the facts of the case bare for the world to see, and corruption at the heart of Scottish officialdom was confirmed by independent arbiters. As the 1996-97 season kicked off, a huge sense of foreboding hung over the green half of Glasgow, but with the addition of Italian maestro Paolo Di Canio, Burns felt he was equipped for the challenge of stopping Rangers' quest for their own 9 in a row. Sadly, it was not to be, and after a miserable defeat in the Scottish Cup against his old club Kilmarnock, Fergus McCann sacked Tommy, much to the anger of the Celtic support. As a protest, Burns refused to leave the stadium through the back door, and instead headed for the steps of Celtic Park, where he was consoled by waiting fans who'd heard the breaking news. Managerial and coaching roles at Newcastle and Reading followed, where Tommy was credited as having an influence over the career of future Liverpool manager Brendan Rodgers. But the lure of Celtic was never far away, and when Kenny Dalglish returned to Celtic Park as director of football, Tommy was brought back as assistant manager to rookie coach John Barnes. After one of the most calamitous seasons in Celtic's history, both Barnes and Dalglish were sacked, and the new millennium began with Tommy Burns helping Martin O'Neill gather together and motivate one of the greatest squads Celtic had ever seen. As 6 goals crashed into the Rangers net at Celtic Park in late August 2000, and as Martin O'Neill leapt into the air to celebrate each of the half-dozen strikes. Behind him stood Tommy Burns, quietly leaning on the home dugout, smiling with satisfaction. As the old Irish song testified, night is darkest just before the dawn. O'Neill would quickly learn the value of Tommy's experience, making him head of youth development and allowing him to recruit men like John Stevenson, who totally rebuilt Celtic's youth academy. Despite taking on the Scottish assistant manager's role in 2002, Burns would retain his role as head of youth development, and when Gordon Strachan became manager in 2005, he immediately made Tommy Burns his first team coach. However, time was short for Tommy, and in 2006, Celtic confirmed that he was undergoing treatment for melanoma skin cancer. Just 2 years later, Tommy was gone, leaving the Celtic support in a state of deep grief and sparing his young charges to secure the title for Tommy in May 2008. His legacy remains with Celtic in the shape of players like Charlie Mulgrew and James Forrest, and his special relationship with mercurial youngster Aidan McGeady helped create a £10 million player who has represented Ireland on the international stage. Tommy's fitness coach, Gregory DuPont, was credited with building the fitness of the slight and temperamental winger who helped Celtic advance in Champions League football. A player, a manager, a coach, a backroom boy, and most of all, a fan, Tommy Burns will live forever as a hero in Celtic's hoops. He once insisted, when you pull on the Celtic jersey, you're not just playing for a football club, you're playing for a people and a cause. In Tommy Burns, the Celtic jersey found one of its most worthy owners, and a man who fought for the cause until the day he died.
But as you say, at the court, Frank McAvenny was found innocent, and the rest were not proven or guilty on the Rangers side. Like Graham Roberts was not proven, and there was a song at the time, of course, McAvenny, he is innocent, all the hands are guilty. And the story that Frank McAvenny tells about that time is that they would all eat their lunch together. The court hearing went on for about 3 or 4 days. They would all eat their lunch together, and the last day of the hearing was on a Friday. And each day, one of the players would buy lunch for the rest of them. So they got on okay off the park. But on the Friday, McAvenny said, "I'll get you the lunch." So he bought 4 suppers, fish and chips, And they all sit in this dinner saying, "This is great. This is a lovely. I'm really enjoying this lunch." All the Rangers boys. And McAvenny says, "I bet you don't know what you're eating." And they said, "No, what's that?" McAvenny said, "Catholic steaks."
Fish on a Friday.
Yeah. So it's funny, all these wee stories that surround that season, that's just the way of football, I suppose. But you make a good point. All the Rangers games that year told us a great deal. They're full of drama. I mean, the 2-0 win, in which McAvenny scored both goals at Celtic Park on the 2nd of January, basically told us that Celtic were going to win the league. In the March game, in which Paul McStay scored an absolutely brilliant equaliser, Jan Bartram got the opener for Rangers, and Andy Walker, it was said he chested in the winner from a Burns corner that came off Anton Rogan. He didn't. He made it quite clear to me that he flew in off his shoulder. It was kind of lucky. But Celtic deserved to win, frankly. And really, from there on, it was people were fairly confident they were going to win the double. Okay. There was a lot more drama to come. There was the semi-final of the Scottish Cup for one.
Yes, there was.
And I don't know if you want to talk about
Henry dropped the ball.
It was unbelievable. Okay, we'll do with the league first. The day in which we won the league against Dundee, I've never seen so many people inside the old Celtic Park. Mm-hmm. People were being moved. For those who don't know, people were being moved from the Janefield end, in which they were practically sitting on the pitch, with so many people that were sitting right across the running track, would be moved round to the London Road end. Throughout the first half, I was right at the front of the jungle. For the reason I'm trying to get on the pitch at the end, they were being moved in their hundreds round to the London Road end. I mean, there must have been 80 to 90,000 people inside the ground that day. It was incredible. Beat Dundee 3-0 very comfortably. Morris, Walker and Walker to win the league. And the fans ran on the pitch. And I grabbed Tommy Burns that day. I was only 17, and everybody was deeply emotional, Chris. It was a big deal to win the league in your centenary season, especially as we've discussed what had gone for a couple of years previous to that.
It was just the fairy tale continued that season.
Oh, it was. And I said to Tommy Burns, "Thanks, Tommy." That's all I said to him. And he just went, "It's okay, pal."
You're welcome.
He was really cool. He was really cool about it, and I was almost overcome with emotion. But he'd seen it and done it all, and he was a special player. All the players from that era would tell you that Tommy was different. It was special to them, And there are lots of stories in the book about that. But then, the cup final itself and the semi-final against Hearts. 2 goals in the last couple of minutes was just astonishing. I mean, it was, you were left gasping for breath, but they pulled that off, McGee and Walker with those goals. And the cup final, what an occasion. Alan McKnight in goal again. Packy Boner didn't make that. Peter Grant didn't make it. They were, both of them left in tears at the fact that their injuries were going to keep them at the cup final. And McAvenny scores right at the death, and we've won the double. We've won the double in the centenary season. And what we don't talk about in that game is it's a very small thing, and I'm not trying to detract in any way from Frank McAvenny's reputation, because goodness me, he was almost the complete centre forward that I ever saw play for Celtic. I didn't see Douglas in his form, but McAvenny, he said that night he was having a few glasses of champagne. And Tony Cotty, his great pal from his West Ham days, phoned him and said, "I saw the highlights of the game, I saw it on the news." He said, "We won it, well, absolutely fantastic." Actually, this probably took place the next day, or even on the Monday. It probably wasn't a Saturday night. That's fanciful. And Macca said, great to get those goals. I mean, because McAvenny had a really terrible semi-final. He couldn't hit anything, couldn't hit a barn door. And to get 2 goals in the final, that was fantastic for him. And Cotty said, "Yeah, but the winner, you shinned it in, Frank, didn't you?" And right enough, and McAvenny said, "I did." But right enough, when you look at it, it does come out off his shin a wee bit, And that's the goal that wins us the centenary double. And even that is a bit, sort of last minute, is a bit kind of, it might have gone in or it might have gone anywhere.
It hit his shin because he was already turning around to celebrate before he put it in the net.
He was on his way because he was so... up for it. Yeah, but great days.
Your Celtic career started off actually quite well. We're moving into the centenary season, and there was all the hubbub about that. What was it like to be part of the team that year, Anton? That's one everybody remembers.
It's probably, when you think about it, we were lucky as well, with so many nice guys in that team. I suppose every team says that, if you understand, but we had with a nice bond, with stuff together and had a laugh and had a drink as well, if you understand, And we were, as I say, we were lucky enough in the club centenary year to do that. And to be fair, if you looked at it in some situations, you say this is never going to happen. The way things were going. When you think about the game at Hamilton in the cup, Parkhead, we could have got beat by them in January. We could have been out of the cup, and there were so many different factors that all came together. To be fair, I think we got away with murder. We're really, really lucky.
That's the first time I've heard the centenary season described as being lucky, Anton.
I'm not saying we didn't play good football. I'm saying scoring them goals against Hearts in the last couple of minutes. And, obviously there's a little bit of luck involved somewhere. Someone had to be in the right place at the right time, didn't they?
Even there last week, when I was trawling through some of the old videos and stuff to get some of the commentary, see when you look back at that team, there was some talent in that team, wasn't there?
It was a powerful team. It was powerful. And to be fair, as you said on Big Billy, everyone knew exactly what they had to do all the time.
Centenary Year as well, maybe raised the occasion as well. But as I say, there's a lot of factors, and we did have luck in that game, mate. You know, we were very lucky in a couple of games, but we didn't play well every game.
Yeah.
Well, I think we did, but we didn't.
Well, we sort of look back at that time with sort of, green tinted
Everybody
spectacles.
thinks every game was steamrolled, everyone, but you know, there was a lot of games we were on our heels.
I remember that season well, because you're thinking, God, we have to do it this year. And even, at some stages it looked like we weren't going to do anything, which would have been a disaster.
When we were in that situation, I have to say that hard semi-final, what was it, 2 minutes to go and we were 1-0 down, you're thinking, oh well,
aye,
concentrate on the league now. And then all of a sudden, that happens,
That was brilliant. Well, I think we'll continue to look at that season with green tinted spectacles. What about that?
Exactly, yeah, it was brilliant, absolutely marvellous. I loved every minute of it.
What way did Billy line out the team? Did everybody know their roles? Everybody know what they had to do for the team?
It is indeed, Chris, as you say, it's just so, the way everything was set out, it just seemed to, there's faith and I just seemed to think, with the faith, luck, everything, we can call it whatever you want, but just whatever move Billy made, it seemed to work, When you think about, as I say, the semi-final, when he brought on both, when he made changes, things happened, didn't they? In the semi-final and the final. So you think, well, obviously, either Big Billy exactly knew what he was doing, or as you say, a little bit of luck was involved as well.
He'd probably be called a technical genius today and only have...
That's what I would call him. That's exactly what I would call him.
And what a beautiful day it was that day. I remember the dust coming up from the track.
Yeah.
And it was hard to see the pitch at times. From down the front in Hampden.
It was like a heat haze at Hampden, never been seen before. But it was a cloud. It was an azure sky, completely and utterly blue. And the only cloud on the horizon, if you want to stitch it together that way, was of course the appearance of Margaret Thatcher. It's a very odd thing that, Chris, to decide to make her sort of a guest of honour. And she'd been touring Glasgow that morning and been popped up for the cup final. And of course, I think it was the teaching unions in particular were well aware of her presence and handed everybody, the Celtic fans and the Dundee United fans, they handed us red cards.
That's right.
In which to send her off. And I just remember that distinctly as much of the... I remember the game, but you remember these strange reasides as well. A sea of red cards. Thousands and thousands of people think Thatcher. Get to F if you want to edit it, and sending her off with these cards. And
the strangest of selections for someone to present a cup.
Yes.
Especially with the potential of a team like Celtic to win the cup.
Absolutely. And there's Roy Aiken. I remember Roy wiping his hands clean on his shorts before he shook her hand and that kind of thing. There's a lot of things that stick in memory.
Yeah.
But I asked quite a lot of being interested in politics myself, I asked quite a lot of the Celtic players that I spoke to whether there had been any protest about meeting her. Both teams did before. This is traditional, of course, meeting a kind of guest of honour, the person who's going to present the cup before the game in Hampden itself. And a lot of them, being fairly savvy about the media, said, oh no, there was nothing there. But one or two of them said, I don't want to tell you this on the record, but I didn't go. And I'm not going to say who it was for obvious reasons. But one guy who very clearly on the record said he didn't go was Lex Bailey. Who some listeners may not have heard of, but Lex had a great Centenary season. He was a big strapping central defender whose father had played for Rangers and was a sports writer. And Lex had come through the Bhoys. He was a captain of the reserves for a long time. He came through that season. Billy McNeil knew a lot about him because he'd signed them originally, and came into the team, through injury and done very well on occasion. And he'd refused to go on the basis to meet her on the basis that his grandfather had been a miner, or was a miner. I don't know if he was alive or not at the time, but said that he would never have forgiven him if he shook the hand of that particular prime minister. So Lex didn't go, and one or two others didn't go.
Well, considering you had Anton Rogan, of course, from West Belfast and the team as well. You had Mick McCarthy, obviously the Irish captain, but also...
Yeah. Are you trying to flush out some names from me here?
No, I'm just telling everybody who they are, and you don't have to.
Of course. But of course, but in a sense, you're right. That's why I did ask, because both home and abroad, there were very strong reasons why some of these players would think twice about meeting Margaret Thatcher, and not just because they were playing for Celtic, but because of their backgrounds or the politics or whatever. And I'm pleased to say that, right enough, they weren't interested in her. And that's a good thing. I mean, there was a famous story, as often told by Frank McAvaney, that he said to her, this is the other side of the political coin, of course, he said to her, thanks very much. And she said, sorry? Thanks very much. Thank you for what? And he said, for lowering the taxes. So Frank was thinking about his back pocket there, but the rest of them, quite a few of them, knew exactly what I was driving at when I was asking this question.
Of course.
But actually, when I think about it, just one last thing about that, because they were quite a bright side. There was a lot of guys on that team that were bright. Billy Starr, Mark McGee, Andy Walker, Roy Eakin, Pat Bonner, Tommy Burns, all really bright guys. By no means your average Joes, by no means your average footballers. They were savvy, these guys. They were very grown up in lots of ways. And there was a real division between the sort of grown up men and the lads like Chris Morris and Derek White and the like, who were having a laugh. Anton Rogan, who were up for a few drinks.
But listen to those names that you're talking about, Douglas. This is the very short time before the influx of foreign players came to the leagues in the British Isles.
Yeah.
And every player you're talking about there was, a homegrown player. They all knew what Celtic was, and this was the last era where that was actually relevant.
Yeah, I'd not thought about that myself, to be honest with you, in the lead up to this, but yes, it's an extremely good point. And again, it's probably a reflection of the fact that football was changing, or about to change. And again, not that long after the game that we're talking about, Celtic themselves have been forced to look at the European leagues to find players that they felt were of sufficient quality for lots of reasons.
We'll have to talk about your first game against Rangers. Your whole 14 to 17 minutes of it.
14? Well, the last thing the manager says was don't get involved.
Good to see you listened.
And it was one of them. As you know, people always recognise me, and I used to get the boys to launch it right into the box, and I used to go and bat the goalkeeper and just, and get a free kick and all that, but just put them on their backside. And that's what happened in the Rangers game. And Woods touched it down the post, and I've smashed them, and it was a free kick, but the referee gave a corner, and I couldn't stop laughing. And that's what was winding Woods up. So he was absolutely furious from there because I cracked him. And it was a free kick, and if they gave a free kick, there'd have been nothing more said about it. But because he gave a corner, Woods was still peeling, and of course when he got passed back, and all he had to do was pick it up, but he didn't. He backpedaled and sort of let me go for it so he could try and elbow me. It all kicked off from there. It was all handbags, and then Robbo came sneaking in behind Terry Butcher, and try to give us a dig. But it was one of them. It was one of those situations. It was handbags at 10 paces. To be honest, it happens up and down the country. The referee lost the plot completely, and then of course we get charged for that. I couldn't believe it, I got a phone call from Big Billy. He said I've got to go and get charged, and it was a Sunday morning. I'm not the best in any morning, but I was pissed for the night before, and I said I can't drive. I'm still pissed. And he was saying, who you got there? And I was saying, Big Al McKnight's here. And he said, get him to drive it. We can afford to let him lose his licence. So that was the scenario, and it was funny. You know, that week we got off court. You know, we got off court, and I used to wind everyone up. And of course, I bought all the Rangers boys fish on the Friday, didn't I?
Catholic steak.
It was unbelievable. They didn't, but that just shows you they didn't have a clue. You know, Bill McMurdo was there, and he's laughing, and Woods and Butcher and that were going, "What are you laughing at?" Just good Catholic steak boys. It was, you know, and of course I get knocked out, and you know, and I keep winding them up. But that season, you know, I keep winding. Even now, they couldn't even beat us in court that year. So it was great. I mean, I started laughing when I got knocked out, and Woods and Butcher got the guilty, and you know, and I killed myself laughing, and Robert's got the not proven.
Right.
And he says, "What's that mean?" I says, "You got off it." So it was well, they know you done it, but they can't prove it. So
while you were actually sitting together, you know, waiting to go to court and stuff, were you just laughing about the situation, or was it deadly serious?
We couldn't leave the court because there was a world media, because it was the first time the police ever get involved in sport or in football. You know, so it was world media. It was, you know, I've never bought so many suits. I had to wear a different suit every day because of the world press.
Oh, aye. Like, you need an excuse, right?
Yeah, it was good. But it was, but Celtic were so miserable. They weren't going to get me a barrister. They were going to get me Jimmy Farrell.
Mr. McGee.
And that's the truth. On the Friday of the court day, we're waiting on the verdict coming back. Jimmy said to me, "Don't worry, Patrick, we'll win this." He didn't even know my name. You know, and what chance do you have? And it was, so, I mean, it was embarrassing. So Graham Souness offered to buy me and I know Graham, and you know, and he says, not to do with Rangers. He says, "I'll get you a barrister." And I says, "Thanks very much, but I'll declined it." But he gave me the ammunition that I needed to get one off Celtic. You know, I just says, "Look, Rangers have offered to back me a barrister."
How embarrassing was that, though?
But that was it. You know, that's the Celtic. I mean, when I broke my arm against Rangers at Ibrox as well, they had to call. If I broke my arm, they called my mate. I had to put a call out for my mate at Ibrox to take me to hospital. They wouldn't even take me to hospital. An absolute joke, but don't get me started on them.
How do you get feedback from your readership? I mean, how do you know whenever you have your little editorial meeting or whatever and you're putting the magazine together, is this what people want?
It's a difficult one. I mean, we do get people still email us in terms of things. Sometimes you get emails of things you like. Generally, people maybe if they don't like something, they'll still feedback. But what we always feel is that we're all Celtic supporters anyway. And we also realise that we work within, as I was saying earlier on, the kind of trying to appeal to the different constituents in terms of supporters, the football department, and obviously the club. So we kind of know what we can do, and there are other platforms, for example, if, say, on the back of maybe a game, then fans maybe want to kind of talk about individual players or performances, etc., etc. And then they have those platforms, and maybe the Celtic View isn't one of them. So we've kind of we feel our kind of unique selling point is the access that we get to the manager and the players, and they're just really, really supportive. I mean, obviously the manager's been here a long time, and he's always kind of, obviously maybe grown up with the Celtic View, but he's always been a big supporter as a player and now as manager, and I think that's where we're able to, having interviews with the players, and then obviously the next players that maybe other people don't get. That's what we hope to make up for the fact that there's certain things that we wouldn't be able to touch on.
Mm-hmm. From my own experience, one of the things that I enjoyed about the Celtic View, and to an extent the match day programme, is the historical pieces as well. But the View and the programme, would it be fair to say, have got a little bit samey over the years because of the developments in the View to become a magazine as opposed to just a 4-page newspaper.
Yeah, I mean that's probably a fair point actually, because to an extent the match programme is almost like it's a mini magazine now.
Yeah.
And again, if you look back to programmes maybe in the sort of early 70s and stuff, again they were quite small, and again I always remember they always printed all the games. Obviously that was in the days when everybody played at 3 o'clock. They printed all the other fixtures, and then they would have the board. Somebody would come up and put the scores up on the board, so you could actually. I always remember just writing them down. Sitting at half time or standing at half time with my dad and doing things like that. And so the programmes it's still quite popular. I think partly because I think there's still people out there that like collecting it, and it's difficult. As I say, I think you're right in terms of it's hard for us sometimes to put a real marker between the two, because effectively they are two magazines.
You mentioned it's collectible. The Celtic View is collectible, as are programmes. Do you find that you still get people sort of contacting you? Have you got the issue from 1979 when my wee lad was on the back page or something?
We do on occasion, or quite often you'll get if it's somebody's birthday, then they'll maybe be looking for a copy of the magazine from, say they're celebrating their 50th or 60th birthday. Maybe they copy when they were born. We don't have the extensive back copies, but we can give them like photocopies of those issues. And again, I think it's a nice touch, and especially for maybe fans who remember the View from like the 70s or 80s. It's got obviously a nice souvenir, and it is a collectible. It's always been something that's collectible, and you know people who've got issues going back 20, 30, 40 years.
And have you got a copy of every single edition?
We do, actually, yeah. We do have there might be one or two. Occasionally, do you know what's quite funny? We have them in season-by-season files, so there's been times when we maybe had to try and replenish. For example, the year we stopped at 10, for some reason they seem to be really popular, so somebody they would borrow them and then they'd never return. But yeah, we do, and it's great. I love looking back at the old copies from the 60s and early 70s, just to see some of the adverts. If some of the early programmes, and certainly some of the early Views, for example, they would have adverts for things like, for example, like cigarettes that you would never be allowed to advertise now, and seems strange for us that a magazine from a football club would advertise those things. So it just shows you it's kind of like how society's evolved as well, and it's good to just look back in some of those things.
Do you know what's class? In preparation for this wee interview, I went and bought the best of the Celtic View, the 100 issues that made you laugh, cry and cheer. And when I flick through it, you think to yourself, I had that one. And even when you read some of the historical events, you want to go back and maybe read the rest of the magazine or the newspaper. Yeah. Is there any plan for it all to go digital?
It's something that we've spoke about. Obviously now we do produce a digital version of the Celtic View every week, and we've looked at it a couple of times. I think it would involve somebody having to come in and, I presume, just scan everything, and I think it would be a great archive for anybody who is interested in Celtic history, or at various times we've had people. I heard just Stephen Sullivan, who was a former colleague of ours, who's written a book, Sean Fallon's biography. Yes. He was on your show, and he came in, for example, and was looking through old Celtic Views. We've had other people who have been doing Celtic books have come in and used it as a research tool. So it's something that we would ideally like to do. I think it would help us as well. It's great just to have that at your fingertips. So, and I think people would be able to get benefit from it.
I think one of the things when you talk to people that certainly I've interviewed for the Celtic History podcast, people are a wee bit afraid that all this media and all these magazines and stuff will be lost in time. And I think there's a huge fear that because this is part of our history, that it will go away or we lose all this.
I certainly hope not. We've been talking recently because we're only a couple of years away from the Celtic View celebrating its 50th anniversary, which is I think for any publication anyway, it's just a great achievement to have lasted so long, and we'd obviously, we want to be able to celebrate that at the time, but that's as much us, again, as supporters, being able to look back at the last 50 years of the club, and the high points, the low points, and how they were documented at the time. And it's, if nothing else, as a fan, it's a real blast to be able to do that, and that's one of the privileges of, which is, it's your job, but you're a Celtic fan. And I always wanted to be to write. So I'm a journalist. I'm writing for the club I support. So it doesn't really get any better than that.
And you mentioned that there's a digital version of it now, and that's something that's developed over the last sort of recent time. Anyway, how's it taken off? Because probably my last question to you in this wee interview would be: is there a place for the View today?
I think there is, but I think it's across different platforms now, and it's. If you look at the evolution of the View from that 4-page broadsheet newspaper that started in 1965, and the introduction of colour, then it changed to a magazine, and the paginations varied. It's gone up at various times, and that's maybe just a reflection of the appetite for content. And now we have to, just the same as every other, I think, publication, have to embrace the digital versions. And we've always felt as well that, I remember years and years ago, my gran used to send, she'd collect the View for a few weeks, and then she'd send it to somebody she knew in Canada, and it would take them weeks, and that's how they kept up to date as much as you could with what was happening back here. So obviously we felt that, certainly for a lot of supporters, for example in North America, to be able to, they obviously can't go into the shop on a Wednesday morning and buy the View, but they can have it just waiting there to download and put on their iPad or their phone or whatever reader that they're going to have it on. I think that's a great thing, and I think increasingly you'll see that more and more people will maybe turn away from the traditional publication onto a digital version. But I still think there's a place for, in much the same way as there's always a place for a physical book as opposed to just an e-reader. I think that's the same thing with magazines like the Celtic View. There'll always be people that want to hold that in their hand and read it.
And even when you look at the developments in the Celtic website as well, and you get news right now. I mean, if I lift up my iPhone right now, I can go right in there and read all the latest Celtic news. Yeah. How the Celtic View's different is that it does give you those timepieces, and it gives you a more in-depth insight into the club itself. I would imagine that would definitely be the direction that you would hope to continue on, would it be?
Yeah, well, we've had to just, for a long time, I think we've had to accept that, it's very, very rare that the View can break news because, because of the whole 24-hour rolling news culture. And I'd say because supporters now, there's so many different platforms for fans, and also for fans to kind of interact with each other and discuss whatever the issues of the day are. So that we've as I say, we've realised that one of our selling points is the fact that we have the access to the players and the manager, and they'll speak to us mainly, well, obviously with the club magazine, but also because they know that when they say something to us, it's not going to be twisted or distorted, or there's going to be any mischief in terms of the headlines. What they say goes in, and we're never going to embarrass them. So that, they trust us. So, and that's one of the things that I think when people read the View, at least they know that's what the players have said, but also they are getting maybe a wee bit more of an insight because they won't get that elsewhere.
Have you ever had an instance where somebody has taken something the wrong way?
I'm trying to think.
Not you, of course, Paul. Probably Stephen Sullivan or somebody like that.
Well, do you know, I always remember it was actually a match programme, and we were playing. It was over the Christmas period, and we were playing Hearts. It was Martin O'Neill was the manager, and Martin O'Neill he held great store by the programme. I mean, he was very, very. It was his magazine and his programme, and he was just brilliant, absolutely brilliant. But we had carried an interview. It was with Andy Lynch, who was just he's a great guy as well. But it was at the time Simon Lynch was here,
right? Yes.
And Andy had obviously, he was saying he felt Simon had scored a few goals in the reserves, deserved his place in the team. but then again, you're thinking he's up against Hearts and Sutton and Larson. But then he went on to say, Celtic will beat Hearts. Hearts are rubbish. We'll hammer Hearts. And Martin O'Neill had read this and said, well, the Hearts players will be in the dressing room reading that, saying, oh, is that right? We'll show them. So he wasn't very happy about that. And he said, look, you know, apart from the fact he said, come on, Simon Lynch isn't going to get a game before Henrik or Chris Sutton or John Hartson. So that was one of the times he kind of just, he wasn't annoyed, he just said, you know, you don't want to be giving ammunition to the opposition before the game and G them up by somebody telling them that rubbish and they'll get no chance.
Brilliant. That's smashing, Paul. Thanks very much for coming on today. I mean, it is really important, this club newspaper. You know, even when you look at the history as it developed throughout the years and got up to the takeover days and all the rest of it, and to see it still in circulation today, I think every Celtic supporter is very proud whenever they see the Celtic view in the shop. And yes, we do still take it down, put it over the Rangers news too. So that gives us that wee opportunity as well.
Yes, we all do that.
Paul Connery, thanks a million for joining us today. Very much appreciated.
Cheers. Brilliant. Thanks a lot, Chris.
Cheers. Talk to you soon.
Cheers. Bye. Bye.
When you think about the signing of the Polish international Dariusz Jankowski, he was signed because we failed to get Maurice Johnston back. You may want to talk about that. Paul Elliott was signed from the Italian league.
Yeah, from Pisa.
From Pisa. Yeah, but clearly they were also looking at the Italian league a bit as well. So quite soon after the 88 Cup final, yes, you're absolutely right. Things were beginning to change in terms of an influx of Dubček, of course, came from Legia Warsaw as well.
Right.
And the left back, who was around Celtic Park for much longer than his fellow countrymen. He was shipped off, I think, to Bristol, one of the Bristol teams after being in several nightclubs in Glasgow for too long. But yeah, no, it's a fair point. But as I say, that was, but that in itself was because they failed to get Neil Johnston back.
But it also puts into perspective, everybody in that team knew Margaret Thatcher, and everybody in that team knew what Margaret Thatcher was about. I mean, obviously she's dead and gone now. If she was to present a trophy today to the current Celtic team, I don't even know if the same relevance would be there.
Yeah, and that's the point you're making. Yeah, indeed, and you're quite right. You're quite right to make it. No, it wouldn't. It wouldn't. There would be very few who would know or care. And this is in an era long before media training. Where players would be much more kind of old-fashioned in a sense, pros and just want to get on with the job and that kind of thing, and more straightforward in their views. But you're right. The Celtic team of today would be, because it's a collection of internationals from all over the world, maybe because of the kind of person she was and the political career she had, would know her from the international stage, but would not really care so much about the politics of it.
Well, she didn't detract from a fantastic day, that's for sure.
No, not in the least. Not in the least.
I remember the Centenary season, though. One of the things I remember about it was with the resurgence of Rangers. I remember the start of the season and thinking to myself, of all the times to be alive and all the times of being a Celtic supporter, we have to win the league this year, and we're going to be really up against it to be able to do it. Yeah. But something just happened that year that we won the double.
Yeah, it did, and I remember thinking exactly the same thing. And it was almost after it was like we just about used up all our luck for years and years and years after. You know what I mean? But that season, something did happen, and I think Billy McNeill got the right blend there. Even though he wasn't spending a fortune to get it, I think Mick McCarthy had, no matter who had signed him, it would be £500,000, something in that region. But he bought well with Billy Stark, etc., etc. But there was an impetus to win the league that season because of what it meant to Celtic, and I think almost all of those players understood that. A point you've already made.
And it was the club. It was everything that you put your hand inside your soul.
Yeah,
it was your soul that won Celtic the double that year.
Yeah,
I
that's
know
right.
That sounds cheesy, but it really was.
But you're like a force of nature almost. An absolute will to win. But there was a cleverness there too. Because when they went on the pre-season training to Sweden, Alan McKnight tells this great story. And again, what people will not realise is that Billy McNeill was a fantastic manager, but in an all-encompassing way. He saw, like a general on the hill, Caesar. He saw the big picture. He looked after everybody at the club. He knew their names. He ran the show. He marshalled the troops. But the tactical genius at Celtic Park was Tommy Craig, his assistant. He had been there prior to, under Davy Hay, prior to McNeill's return. Tommy Craig was a real sort of clever guy, had worked a bit with the Scottish international setup as a coach, was really into the tactical side of things. And he'd seen what Celtic had been missing. So at the start of the 87-88 season, the Centenary season, when they went off to the pre-season training in Sweden, he decided that there was a formula to a lack of strength before they bought Joe Miller and Frank McAvenny later in that season. A lack of strength in the team, a lot of players leaving, a lot of players coming in, and perhaps an overall lack of strength at the back. He decided to defend from the front. So they would press the defence, the midfield and the strikers of the opposing team before they even got the ball almost. Shut them down, work hard. So McAvenny, Walker, McGee, Miller at the front would really pressurise their opponents at the back. And Alan McKnight talks about this as a something that was in train even from the bounce games they had. So you would have Alan McKnight, this is the brilliance of it, you have Alan McKnight, Billy McNeill and Davy Hay on one side of an 11-a-side pitch, and the entire Celtic first 11 on the other. And all they would do is McKnight would stand in the goal on his own, isolated. McNeill and Tommy Craig would kick off. The Celtic 11 would win the ball, and as soon as and every time they moved or did something wrong, Tommy Craig would blow the whistle and say, "No, stop, do this, move there, go there, do it." And it was just the three of them against us. So, but they worked on this for hours and hours and hours and hours until all these players knew exactly what Tommy Craig wanted them to do in a positional and tactical sense, where they should be in relation to the ball and their opponent. And it really worked. Mm-hmm. It really worked, or it worked in a sense for a season. And thereafter, teams got kind of wise to it, But it was clever, and it was the basis, I think, yes, there was the will, to win for special reasons at the Centenary season, but it was the basis of the tactical way that they could build a running league, a winning pattern.
It's Celtic first and Celtic last and Celtic over all.
Soon as big spenders were expected to steamroller their way to the major honours. But with Billy McNeill back at the helm, the Birthday Boys were not prepared to let anyone gate-crash their party. McNeill proved to be an astute operator in the transfer market, with the arrival at Parkhead of veteran midfielder Billy Stark, Motherwell striker Andy Walker, and fullback Chris Morris from Sheffield Wednesday. These relatively low-key captures would later be complemented by Aberdeen's highly rated Joe Miller and the eye-catching £1.25 million West Ham and Scotland striker Frank McAvenny. Irish international centre-half Mick McCarthy was another new face, having been signed by Hay prior to his dismissal. Along with Celtic stalwarts like keeper Packy Bonner, Aitken, Burns and McStay, as well as youngsters such as Derek White and Anton Rogan, the new faces would form a squad which would deservedly claim the league title after a vintage championship campaign. With the maestro Paul McStay in wondrous form, those traditional Celtic attributes of flair and fight were displayed in abundance as the Celts marched to the championship and the final of the Scottish Cup. The boys now stood on the verge of writing a fairy tale ending to a most incredible century of tears and cheers. Victory over Dundee United in the Scottish Cup final on Saturday, May the 14th would be the perfect final chapter. Cup final day saw the sun shining from early morning. A perfect day to make Celtic history, and not even the presence of Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher could cloud the occasion. As the Tory leader took her seat in the stand, there was piercing boos and whistles as virtually the whole stadium united in their disapproval of the PM. For a few minutes, Hampden slopes became a blanket of red, as supporters throughout the ground waved red cards in protest at Thatcher's presence. But on the pitch, things didn't go exactly to plan. A poor clearance from keeper Alan McKnight, a stand-in for the injured Bonner, was headed straight back towards the Celtic goal. United striker Kevin Gallagher outpaced Aitken to reach the ball first, and from the edge of the area, he lashed an unstoppable shot high into the goal. Slowly, Celtic began to push United back, and by the hour mark, the Hoops were seemingly launching constant raids towards their opponent's goal. With 20 minutes remaining, left-back Rogan jinked past the United defender and swung a perfectly weighted ball into the area. There, the ever-alert Frank McAvenny pounced at the back post to head home the equaliser. So as we entered the final minutes of a century of Celtic Football Club, Joe Miller trotted over to the main stand side to take another corner. Both teams piled men into the box. Miller's tired low cross trundled towards the edge of the area, where Billy Stark connected with his right leg to divert the ball towards goal. As the ball bounced past the penalty spot, the unmarked McAvenny again reacted first, and in a flash had smashed the ball into the net. Hampden rocked as a Hoop support erupted. The double was Celtic's. History had been made. At that moment, the future looked every bit as bright as a blazing sun which had bathed the National Stadium on an unforgettable afternoon. But for the followers of the Hoops, the fairy tale was soon to be replaced by a horror story. Within weeks of season 1988-89 kicking off, it had become painfully clear to the Celtic support that a lack of investment in the double-winning team had allowed Rangers, now in the hands of businessman David Murray, to swiftly regain the upper hand. Celtic's title defence had been pathetically inept. They were hammered 5-1 and 4-1 at Ibrox as Rangers reclaimed the championship with contemptuous ease. The Celts would defeat their city rivals 1-0 in the Scottish Cup final to deprive Rangers of the treble, but the momentum was now firmly with the Govan club. The gulf in quality on the pitch was notable, but it paled into insignificance compared to the chasm in ambition between those running both clubs. That point was emphatically proven when Rangers completed the audacious capture of a seemingly Parkhead-bound Mo Johnston. Just weeks prior to signing for Rangers, the Nantes striker had been paraded at Parkhead and hailed as a man to spark the Celtic fight back. But complacency by the Celtic board and a U-turn by the player meant the deal was never formally completed. This allowed Souness and Rangers to pounce. The signing of the ex-Celtic striker rubbed salt into the wounds of Hoops fans who could only watch in disbelief as their returning hero ditched them for the greatest rivals. Johnston's act of betrayal to the club he professed to love still rankles deeply. But while this shock move can be partly explained by the player's greed, much of the blame must lie at the feet of the incompetent Celtic board. Rangers had thrown down a challenge to their rivals, but as a new decade dawned, it was clear the Celtic board lacked the vision, know-how, and even the desire to respond. Parkhead faithful were set to endure one of the most painfully miserable periods in the club's history.
It's Celtic first and Celtic last and Celtic over all.
And it's at this time where, and we touched on it very briefly at the very beginning of the podcast, where the lack of ambition of the club really started to show its true colours.
Yeah.
When you look at the likes of the Centenary Cup Challenge match, you know, and we were expecting an AC Milan or a Real Madrid, and we ended up with a team from Brazil called Cruzeiro.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, basically, not one of the leading lights of Brazilian football. I mean, to be frank, at the time, I'd not heard, Santos did or not. I'd not heard of them, but we went out and we beat them 4-2. Mm-hmm. But the lack of ambition you point to, and we have pointed to several times, Chris, can be summed up in two words. And I do not mean to be unfair. Ian Andrews. He was the only addition to the squad that summer. Now, Ian Andrews was in goal for that game. They won 4-2. McAvenny and Walker, at least scored one apiece. I don't remember who scored the others. But it was in the sun on a sort of Sunday afternoon, and it was fairly low-level stuff. I think about 40,000 people turned out for the game. But, the Centenary season had come and gone, frankly. And Billy McNeill had demanded something between £1 and £4 million for players and got about 800,000 and didn't really need to spend all of that on Ian Andrews. So Andrews is known now in the annals of Celtic fans anyway for the 5-1 thrashing that Celtic got at near the beginning of the following season, the 88-89 season, the 5-1 thrashing at Ibrox, where Tommy Burns had his head in his hands at times and had said afterwards he really worried that Rangers were going to surpass the 7-1 victory, Celtic's 7-1 victory over Rangers in the League Cup final, back in the 50s. And it was that bad. I was there. I paid over the odds for a ticket, and it was a terrible. I mean, we'd gone ahead with Frank McAvenny, who was then carried off with a broken arm.
That's right.
So again, another one of these little quirks. Had McAvenny not been injured, goodness knows what would happen. But Ian Andrews was not prepared, I think, for that atmosphere. And the defence were very poor. Let us not forget, it was not in any way all the goalkeeper's fault. Celtic were disorganised and the defence were poor, and Andrews was inexperienced and unready. And that was basically the end of his Celtic career. I think after that, Alan Rough came in for a while because Pat Bonner was injured, and Alan Rough was very much at the end of his footballing career, But that really does highlight the lack of ambition, and from that point on, there was one major win in the cup final of '89, but even that win was a falsehood in a sense.
It was papering over the cracks, wasn't it?
Absolutely, it was.
And you talk about the 5-1 game at Ibrox, and I certainly don't want to dwell on that, but the very fact that the Rangers' tactics at that stage, or the Rangers' blueprint at that stage, was to sign all these English internationals. That had been a team full of Scots. It could have been 7-8-9-1 that day.
Yes. Oh yeah, absolutely. It really could have been.
Only Ray Wilkins wanted to do showboating and mess around. It could have been a whole lot worse.
That's right, and he scored a great goal that day, Wilkins, an absolutely fantastic volley. But we shouldn't forget also in the New Year game that season, we again went in front at Ibrox with a Chris Morris free kick and lost 4-1. And again, people like Mark Walters destroyed us. And there was a golfing class rapidly growing to the point where, in the final day of the season, the 88-89 season, Rangers, if they won the Scottish Cup, would win the treble. Well, this is Celtic had won the double the previous year and had done it in style, breaking records for points totals, and goals scored.
I still believe to this day the only reason we won that cup final was because we had to stop Rangers from winning the treble. Again,
that kind of will to stop them. I think that overall that's probably right, but I think there are there's one large point and there's one very small point that go alongside the point you've made. The small point is the lead up to the goal, where we took it. Well, you can take a throw in that was never ours.
It was never ours.
and the referee just said, "On you go," and gave the ball to Peter Grant, who just pumped it up the park, and Joe Miller latched onto a mistake from Gary Stevens, and Joe Miller, of course, wanted to play centre forward for Celtic, and because Andy Walker had an eye injury, was being allowed to do so. He felt sort of unshackled and unchained, and was delighted to get that chance. The larger point is, we thought we had every reason to think we had signed Maurice Johnston from Nantes. Maurice Johnston was on the bus on the way to the cup final, and it was at Love Street previous weekend with Celtic, and was at the cup final with Celtic. Now, it may or may not be known that on the way to the cup final in '89 on the bus, Mo Johnston sat beside his old mate Peter Grant, and he said to Granty, Granny, I haven't signed this contract. And Granny said, what do you mean? He said, I haven't signed it. And that was as much elaboration as I could get. Mm-hmm. The next thing, immediately after the cup final, Scotland were involved in a three-way tournament with Rangers, with England and Colombia, the Rouse Cup as it was then. It was kind of it was the tournament that replaced the old home nations, and they were up at, I think, Largs, McCoist, Johnston, and again Peter Grant were taking part in this wee bands game, and Johnston said, I'll be nutmegging you next season, Granty? And Peter Grant had said, what are you talking about? And Alan McCoist said, no, he's serious. He's signing for Rangers. And sure enough, I mean, and even at this distance, Chris, it seems incredible to say it, but Will Johnston did sign for Rangers. You know, having appeared again in the Celtic jersey alongside Billy McNeil. You know, that Centenary jersey alongside Billy McNeil.
From 1980 to 1982, the umbrified green away shirt with white collar and the Celtic crest in the middle of the shirt, plastered with small Umbro diamond logos all over the kit, was used until 1982. 82 to 83 seen an all-white Celtic shirt with a number of thin green vertical pinstripes added to the front, back and sleeves. A green v-neck and green cuffs finished off the away shirt, which was complemented with green shorts and green socks. A third kit was used during the 82-83 season, and the colours were vice versa from the away kit that was used this season. An all-green shirt with a number of thin white vertical pinstripes on the front, back and sleeves of the shirt were used with a white v-neck and white cuffs. All white shorts and all white socks finished off this third kit. 1984 to 1986 seen a distinctive plain lime green away kit forever connected to Albert Kit Day released. This kit had a dark green v-neck and dark green shorts and socks. In 1985, on this style of kit, the first shirt branding was introduced to the away kit, with C.R. Smith making its first appearance. The shorts were also the first away kit to feature the Celtic Shamrock crest on the shorts on the left side. 1984 to 1985 also seen a yellow third shirt introduced. This shirt features some light shadowing vertical pinstripes along with a green v-neck. Green shorts and yellow socks were the finishing touches to this third kit. 86 to 87 seen a yellow away shirt, which was again featuring a diamond shadow pattern with a green trim along the collar with sleeve cuffs. Green shorts with a yellow diagonal pinstripe on the left thigh were used along with yellow socks, which had a plain green area just below the knee. 86-87 also seen a third kit introduced. This shirt was mainly white with a green section from the head down to the chest. Two black triangles were located at the bottom corners just above the chest. The Celtic crest and Umbro logo were situated within this green area, with the C.R. Smith logo presented in the white area just below. Green shorts with a small white and black diagonal stripe featured on the shorts, which was made up of white socks to complete the kit. The yellow away kit from 86 to 87 was also used during January 98 until the end of this year. 80-90 seen a more radical design of away shirt introduced, possibly a sign of the away kit designs to come for the 90s. Our away kit was again yellow, but with a more abstract feel to it. Green arrow-like patterns were located above the shoulders, and green stripes were featured on the arms and just below the abdomen. Dark green shorts were used and accompanied by yellow socks with a green Umbro diamonds featuring just below the knee.
So obviously we won the league first that year, but everybody remembers the cup final, probably the semi-final and the cup final that year.
The semi-final was the worst game in my career.
Why do you say that?
Because it was awful. It was absolutely terrible, you know.
Mark McGee scored.
John Lennon is still be alive. I was awful.
Yeah.
Honestly, I remember missing a couple of chances.
You crossed the ball for Mark McGee for the second one, didn't you?
Because I said to Mark, I says, Mark, come on in. He was to go right to me, and I said, Mark, you go in the middle. And you know, and I went out in the wide, and you know, it was the same. Well, we used to wind him up, Henry Smith, once in the box, and it was a beautiful day, and put it in the box, and he's always going to drop one in it. I've hit it as high as I could, and it came down, and of course, thanks to Henry, he dropped it.
God bless him.
Yeah. I got my drink after that, but it worked out well. So of course it was even better when what I did. It meant so much. The cup final I'd have been delighted just to have won, but because I had such a nightmare in the semi-final, it was great to get the two in the final.
The cup final, every time you see it, just makes you grin from ear to ear.
Yeah, well, it was, you know, what a beautiful day, what a beautiful... Hampden was a great place at the time because it was an atmosphere, you could get an atmosphere in Hampden. Mm-hmm. You know, I don't like it now, but it was a beautiful day and everyone's singing and dancing and it was superb, absolutely magnificent.
It was a brilliant match though. Maybe your romanticism takes over.
Well, we Joe missed a chance, he scored and all that. You know, and we always knew. I mean, when I scored, you know, there was 14 minutes left. I scored, and you know, you actually see me saying to Paul, "Say, let's get the winner now." You know, it was one of them because we knew we were just piling on the pressure, and it was great. You know, it was superb. Just knew it was there. After that, it was just the momentum took us through. Again, after that, you know, you look forward. You hear about teams winning and celebrating and all that. And the miserable sods at Celtic took us back to Celtic Park, and it was like a wake. You know, there was a couple of bottles of champagne. It was pommy. It wasn't, and we were sitting there going, what do we do now? And all the directors and all that miserable sods with their wives and all that. You know, that's not. We don't want to be in amongst them. You know, so it was horrible. So we sort of a sharp job, and we all disappeared.
Did your relationship with Big Billy sour a wee bit towards the end, Frank?
We go. He had to look after his job, you know. We done a deal. Billy got me in the office and said to me, you know, I understood that Celtic had done me out of money and all that, and we'd done a deal. You know, Billy says, let's stay at the end of the season, get win as a cup, and he can go, and everyone will be happy. I says, right, okay. And he says, but one condition, don't talk to the press, because the press were all over it, saying I was leaving and all that kind of stuff. And he says, don't say nothing to the press, and I says, fair enough. And of course I walked in the Friday, this was a Wednesday, and I walked in the Friday, and Big Billy done the press conference, and says if he wants to leave, he can go and all that, and slaughtered me. So it left a bit, you know, I kicked his door in, didn't I? He wasn't too happy when I smashed his door to get off the lock. I was calling him everything because it was not right. He told me to keep my mouth shut. And but that was one of these situations. It was looking after his job, which I can understand now. But at the time, I was raging, as you can imagine.
It just sounds like one of the many symptoms that were rotten at the club at the time.
Well, I was on right through the core, and you know, and Billy had to look after his job. But
did you want to leave, Frank?
No, never. I would have been there. I'd have been there now. I'd have been manager. I'd have been, you know, I wouldn't have. I'd have been doing my John Clark. I'd have been putting the kit out. I wouldn't have left. I never ever thought I'd leave when I signed for Celtic. Mm-hmm. So I was there for the duration.
You know, I'll ask any Celtic supporter who was alive at the time. This was one of our JFK moments.
Very much so.
And I remember exactly where I was whenever I heard the news. I was in Ann Street in Belfast, walking past Radio Rentals, and there was a crowd around the front window. And a whole to do, and I sort of snuck over and saw it happening, without any sound, and there was just silence. People were just watching, and I don't know if they're Celtic fans or Rangers fans, but nobody knew how to react. including me.
I think that's a very good summary. It was literally as though people could not believe what they were seeing. But interestingly, there have been rumours about this in the weeks preceding him signing, which was in the early days of July of 89. There'd been rumours about this. The Celtic deal had gone sour. That was quite clear. And Bill McMurdo, Johnston's agent, had told one of the tabloids, probably the Record at that time, that the notion that Mo Johnston would sign for Rangers was nonsense. That you could run that story for 100 years and it still wouldn't be true. Well, days later he did sign for Rangers, and right enough, all of Scotland and probably large parts of Ireland came to an utter standstill. He was seen as a Judas, but in many respects he was, because he was such an idol to the Celtic support, as we've talked about. But it was also made quite clear to me by two Celtic players, Frank McAvenny and Peter Grant, that Mo Johnston had never wanted to sign for Rangers. Mo Johnston wasn't doing this to be evangelical in some way. He wasn't doing it to change the history of Scottish football or improve Rangers' image or change their signing policy, so-called. He was doing it for financial reasons, pure and simple, because Celtic refused to pay the same kind of wages that he was on and refused to write off his tax. And you look at the deal, McAvenny went back to West Ham after 17 months in Glasgow for £1.25 million. Celtic's deal, agreed in principle with Maurice Johnston, was £1.2 million.
Yeah.
So the board, even at that time, was spending nothing. They were making a profit on the Johnston deal. Soon stepped in, he saw his opportunity, and it really turned the knife on us for years to come. The confidence at Celtic, if it was low in the face of what Rangers were doing, would really plummet right the way through until we won the Scottish Cup in the middle of the following decade in the 90s.
Against Ardra. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to end this podcast talking about bloody Mo Johnson.
But what would you like to talk about?
I don't know. I've run out of topics now, and I'm deflated. Let's go back to the bit where he blasted himself in front of the Rangers fans and scored.
That's right.
Douglas, this was a fantastic way to end the 80s. When we look back at this decade, and we're like two old boys reminiscing. That was brilliant.
Yeah, it's good fun to talk about it. I think back about it. And there's one thing I would say about the 80s. Rangers' ambition, in the face of threats to their place as they would see it in the game, traditionally from Celtic, but at the time from Dundee United, and to a greater extent Aberdeen, their ambition based around finance has really probably, and doing things like signing Maurice Johnston to stick it to Celtic, really that kind of way they worked around money, I think, has led Rangers to where they are today. Mm-hmm. And I think we have learned the lessons of that period, principally because, as you will talk about in a future podcast, principally because there was a group of men whose families had been associated with Celtic right from the beginning, who were no longer fit for purpose at Celtic Park. And almost every season we point to, and almost all the highs and certainly the lows, you can see that thread emerging, that the times were a-changing. Mm-hmm. And along with that change, there would be trouble and sorrow, but certainly in the 1980s, there was incredible joy. With the background of political and cultural turbulence, there was great joy and there was great romance in a very, very typical Celtic fashion, right from the off and right to the end. You produced players like Charlie Nicholas, the very great Paul McStay, that we still think of now as great heroes, scored some wonderful goals, won some great cup finals, and some fantastic leagues. and had to ourselves a centenary season that I think 100 years on from that date, on the 200th anniversary of Celtic, will still be fondly remembered for what it was. But as Billy McNeill said to me when I first spoke to him about it, he said, it's just a pity we couldn't keep it going for longer. And that, in a way, sums up the 80s. Like a great party with a terrible hangover, you know? and that's really about it.
Yeah, but it was brilliant. We lived through it and it was fantastic at the time.
Yeah, it was.
Douglas Beattie, this has been an absolute pleasure.
Oh, likewise, Chris. Thank you very much for kind of leading me down memory lane and letting me be part of this great podcast series. And I wish you every success in the future, and to Celtic and to all the fans listening, all the best.
Before you go, Douglas, I need you to nominate a charity that will benefit from the donations raised by the Celtic History podcast.
Well, Chris, quite simply for me, it has to be the Kano Foundation. I don't think they've been nominated so far on the podcast, so I think that would be a fitting charity for me, and I think they do great work, and I'm very, very happy for any monies from this to go to them.
Absolutely brilliant, Douglas. Superb. And I know the Keno Foundation is really close to the heart of a lot of the guys involved in Hill Media. And that's smashing. Absolutely brilliant.
Well, it's a great pleasure. And thank you again for asking me on, Chris. And it's been great fun.
Douglas, I'll talk to you again very soon. Thanks again for joining us.
All the best, Chris.
Cheers. Bye. All right, folks, that's the end of Chapter 9. That's us right up to 1990. And so far we've done 20 hours on the Celtic history, and it's been absolutely superb all the way. Thanks very much to Douglas Beattie. Douglas's book, Happy Birthday Dear Celtic. I know I rave on about it all the time. It's just class, so go and buy yourself a copy, and you'll not be disappointed. Thanks this week goes to the Human Torpedo, Chris from the Paradise Report, Pat from Half the World Away podcast, Stuart from the CelticShirt.co.uk, George McCluskey, Anton Rogan, and Frank McAvaney. Also Kelly from Stonehouse, Hullboy, Marty Flynn, and Paul Cudahy from the Celtic View. That was a good wee bit, slip that in there as well. And I know we all grew up with the Celtic View, so it was interesting to hear the history of it too. Thanks of course to the Wakes and Charlie and the Bhoys for the music, to the Parrot for doing the wonderful interviews as usual, and most importantly to everybody that has donated so far. At this point I usually go on about, oh yeah, the donations are coming along, they're coming along. We need to raise more money with this, because as I've said before, a lot of people put a lot of work into it, and all the money raised goes to charity. So go to heelheelmedia.com and go to the Celtic History podcast page, and you'll be able to donate there using PayPal or any major credit card. It's coming along, but it should be more. You know, we see the downloads every single week, and the downloads certainly outweigh the donations, let's put it like that. So we've only got a few chapters left now, and next week is going to be a little bit different, because we're going to cover 1990 to 1995 and not the full decade, because there was one or two things happened during those 5 years, and we want to make sure we cover it properly. So even the format in the next chapter is going to be a little bit different. I've got lots and lots of different people that I've interviewed about the takeover and about what was going on the field as well as off the field, and I'm going to put all those together. And without letting the cat out of the bag, I've got guys like the Not The View on there, and some of the boys are actually involved in the takeover, so it should be really, really interesting listening to. Remember, it's not too late to send in your sound bites. I'm particularly looking for where you were when we stopped the 10. I've got lots and lots for where we were when the Rebels won, but I need some stuff on where you were when we stopped 10 in a row. And tell me your stories about that, tell me what it was like on the day and things like that. Record yourself talking about it and email it to lostboys@gmail.com. So just to give you all those addresses again, you can make your donations at heelheelmedia.com, and all the money of course will go to the charities that are chosen by our special guests. And you can email any sound bites that you have, and time's running out, you only have a few left, and you can email those to lostboys@gmail.com. The next chapter will be out in about 2 weeks, because I'm going to be out of commission for a week or so in between hand. So there won't be one next week, but there will be one the week after. So I hope you enjoyed it. Playing us out of your confessions, my name's Chris McGuigan. You're listening to the Celtic History Podcasts.
Aye, I left early in the AC Milan game when we won 2-1, and I missed the winning goal because I was a wee bit... I'd enjoyed some of the finest stuff that the monks produced, and I thought I'd go to the pub and miss the goal.
My heart couldn't take the penalty kicks against Spartak Moscow, going back, 6-7 years now. And I actually had to go down to the concourse. I could not stand and watch, and when obviously I heard the roars, etc., I ran up the stairs. I get absolute pelters from the people around me, but I just couldn't take it. I felt physically sick because it meant so much to get through, and penalties was just too much for me. But no matter what happens, you wake up in the morning, you're a Celtic fan. What's better than that?
Did what my work putting the fence up in front of the enclosure, and Souness was the manager, and I always remember pitching in that dugout.